Thank you, Björn, for giving me a slot here today to talk about our first experiences in trying to assess the activity in the baby's brains after listening to singing, parental singing. So this is then the project that Pernilla mentioned. So it's a collaboration with Finland and Minna Hutilainen and Vinetta Feldman, who came up with this idea that it would be nice to combine the skin-to-skin care with parental singing. We've heard this before today. Our premature babies, they are born at a very vulnerable stage of brain development. And this is from week 12 in pregnancy up to 40 weeks. And this is really a journey. And the smallest ones we take care of are around here in brain development. So all the nerve cells have been born and they are at the right place in the cortex, but they are just about to start forming contacts and synapses with each other. And as Petrus just pointed out, we believe it's very important what kind of experiences they get at that point. And here is Gabriella at 26 weeks. She's very good at breathing, but she's still very fragile, and many of you work with those tiny babies, and she's exposed to a very unnatural environment with lots of sensory stimulation, with light and noise and painful experiences. And we know, this is from the paper Peter just cited, that the baby brain is on. It's very much into sensory stimulation, and this is resting state networks, so they are just lying still in the scanner, but they have activation of the visual, sensory motor and auditory networks even so they are very much into learning from that sensory experience. And we know now that these sensory signals going through thalamocortical pathway, they are actually processed at the highest level in cortex, at least at 26 weeks gestation. And as we've heard, it's driven by nerve electric activity. And this is the famous site from Carla Schatz, that cells that fire together wire together. It is important what they experience. And this is then, again, the auditory pathway when they exposed a fetus in utero to an external sound. And then it's evident that the signal here, again, the bold signal, is processed in the auditory cortex at week 29 in this case. So it's processed at the highest level, we know that. And here is Gabriella again, skin to skin with her mum in our high-tech environment, very noisy sometimes. And still, if there's a lot of noise, we think that this is good stimulation, the skin to skin. And in this paper, which I think you heard from before, they actually played maternal voices and heartbeat sounds to babies in the incubator, and many times a day over the time they spent in the incubator, and found that they actually could increase the growth of the auditory cortex, as Pierre cited. And that's interesting, so we can stimulate the growth of the brains. And in this paper from Minna's group, they exposed normal fetuses during pregnancy to the word ta-ta over many thousands of times per day. And then they measured the postnatal response by magnetoencephalography. So it's a measure of activation, and found that, as we expected, they actually learn, and they are much more activated if they've experienced this pseudo word before they were born. So this is the perspective from Gabriella inside the incubator, seeing her sisters and mother outside. And Pierre talked about that this can be a very noisy place to be, and it's very different noise from in the womb. It's a broad spectrum of frequencies, and it's a direct exposure to sound, and it's unpredictable noise. And these noises prevent them from hearing language, of course. And the amount of noise they are exposed to differs, of course, a little bit between the type of NICU environment that they are in. So, of course, if you have less beds in a unit, you have lower noise levels. And this study from St. Louis has been cited before here. It's a very interesting study on brain development in babies cared for in different types of NICU rooms, and it's very small groups of babies, but what they found was interesting anyway, that there was a difference in brain development in the superior temporal sulci as part of the auditory cortex. So the babies cared for in the private rooms had less developed auditory cortex, and that was contrary to what was expected, because they of course thought it was good with these private rooms, but then it turned out that they had actually been sensory deprived because their parents weren't there, and they also assessed language development, which also differed between the groups. And other groups, Betty Ward was cited earlier this morning, and she's shown that if you actually go in and stimulate language to these children in the private room environments, you can improve the language development. And I think that's important because it's, among other impairments, it's very common in extremely preterm babies. So a majority of them have receptive language impairments, and many have also expressive language impairments at toddler age. We used to think that it disappears with time, that is just a delay, but newer studies indicate that that's maybe not the case, that it persists at least up to 8 years of age. And there are also some imaging studies, as Petra pointed out. This is a study from Laura Ment's group showing that they have less lateralized language networks, the preterm children. Closely linked to language is then communication, and we were surprised to see in our extremely preterm born children here in Stockholm, when we met them at 6.5 years of age, 14% had already at that age a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, and these children were less than 27 weeks, so they were really extremely preterm. And when we screened for autism, we found that almost a third of them screened positive, so that they should have been investigated for ASD. So, and there is big epidemiological studies showing that the risk for autism is really related to gestational age. So the lower gestational age you are, the higher the risk. And interestingly enough, if you adjust for family risk of neuropsychiatric disorders, it doesn't change the risk. So that means that it doesn't seem to be so strongly genetically as in idiopathic autism, but it's more perhaps related to the environment. And this is from Björn's previous ward in Danderyd, where the parents spend a lot of time with their babies, around 8 hours a day. They sit skin to skin, according to your study. And you see a pair of twins with their mother and father. And of course, we believe that what the baby and the parent experiences here is good skin to skin contact and hearing the heartbeat, feeling the vibrations in the thorax, and so on. And we know from what we've heard this morning that there's a whole lot of research on the effect of music in the NICU. And this is a meta-analysis on that, including both singing and recorded music and all sorts of studies. And in essence, what has been shown, and Manuela also pointed that out, is that there is an improved autonomic stability, so better saturation, less bradycardias and so on, but there is very little studies on the long-term effects. And Manuela has pointed out to us the special importance of the maternal voice. This was an interesting study that came out from Israel when they combined then the kangaroo care or the skin-to-skin care with maternal singing. And again, they found about the same results, that it improved the autonomic stability even more. And what was also interesting was that it reduced the maternal anxiety. So, as always, it's mutual. Mina came up with this question: what if we would look at the long-term effects of this combination of skin-to-skin care and singing? And as it is in the Nordic countries, we are also interested in the fathers, what happens if they sing. So we decided to look at the auditory discrimination skills as a short-term measure of the cortical activation to different stimulations paradigms, and that is also known to some extent predict language development. And then we also plan to look at language and neurodevelopment at toddler age in these children. And we also want to assess the interaction between parent and infants, and Pernilla is doing that, and she's also presented to us some results on the parental anxiety. So we aim to include 160 stable babies, very preterm children and their families. And this is a randomized control study, but it's open. And the intervention is then that a music therapist meets the families over a number of sessions over 4 weeks, and they teach the parents how to learn signs of overstimulation and communication, and then stimulate them to sing whatever they feel is appropriate to sing, usually lullabies. And the control group gets standard care, and that is including kangaroos or skin-to-skin care. And the parents, they collect the number of hours they sing and the number of hours they sit skin-to-skin. And we are also validating these data by a recorder, the Lena system, to see. But we still have problems in discriminating between spoken language and sung language with the recorder. So we're struggling with that. Here's Pernilla that you've met, and here is Kaisa Marie, who's the music therapist. You're up there in Helsinki. And you and Pernilla are doing the intervention then, and we've seen this film before today about how it can be when a mom sings to her baby. And as Pernilla showed, they do sing a lot after this intervention. And maybe the father is more than the mothers. And these are short-term results then after the intervention. So we don't know for how long they start to sing. We want them to go on singing for their children throughout childhood, but we don't know that, of course. So as outcome measures, we look at the event-related response in the auditory cortex and the MEG response, which is magnetic encephalography, at 40 weeks then. And a secondary outcome is then language and neuromotor development at 2 years of age. And we look at the early relationship between parent and child at 4 months, using PSERE method, and parental anxiety using STI questionnaire. And then Pernilla showed you the parental experiences as a qualitative study. So these are some preliminary data from the ERP study. So this the electric potentials in the auditory cortex, and this is data from Finland. And the stimulation paradigm here is the pseudoword tata, and there are different deviations in that, so they can change the duration of the vowel and the intensity of the syllable and so on. And there are emotional components to this, so it can be a happy tata, and it can be a sad tata, and it can be an angry tata. So they respond to this. And in the control preterm group, we have this type of response around 200 milliseconds. And we have a larger response, we believe, in the preterm group, but we haven't done the group statistics yet. And the preterms actually do respond the most to the happy tata. And then we have set up magnetoencephalography in newborns here at Karolinska, because we have a core facility for that. And this is actually just as the brain have electric signals, it creates magnetic fields that are collected then in this MEG scanner, but it's absolutely passive collection, so there is no field from the scanner. So the baby lies here like in an MRI scanner. It's a little bit too big to the baby, so we can collect from one hemisphere at a time. So we look at the left hemisphere, and it's under natural sleep. And what we've looked at so far in the MEG is the oddball paradigm. So it's tones, it's a standard tone of 1000 hertz and duration of 100 milliseconds. And then there are deviations in that tone in the frequency and the duration. And if they show an altered brain response to that deviation, we believe that they have learned how to discriminate between different sounds. So in this standard signal, we have the three groups here. So these are full-term controls with spread measure around, and then we have the preterm controls without intervention here, and we have the preterm intervention group down here. So, and we still have very small groups. But then when we look at the deviants, how they react to this changed tone, we think it's interesting that, again, we have the full-term controls here, and we have the preterm control group up here, but the preterm intervention group seem to somewhat resemble the full-term controls. But this is, again, these are preliminary data. And then we look at the mismatch negativity that we've heard about before. That is actually the difference between the standard and the deviant. So it's here the difference, and about 200 milliseconds after the stimulation. And again, it's the same pattern. So we see the full-term controls down here with the ST, and then the preterm controls and the preterm intervention group down here. So in summary, we have established this music therapy intervention at the two sites. And here in Stockholm, we are beginners in relation to music therapy, I must say. We have an effect on the parents. They start singing, we know that, and we haven't found any adverse effects. We've set up this auditory stimulation paradigm in the MEG scanner, and we do think data are reliable. It's too early to make any conclusions, and we're still recruiting and evaluating children. And I mean, it's the long-term evaluation on language and neurodevelopment that is the most important part. So, because what we want them to do is to start to establish good ways of communicating with their babies, and that would would last for the whole entire childhood. That would be the great goal. So I'd like to thank the Finnish group, and especially Eino here, who's also done a lot of the analysis, and Minna is going to talk in the next talk. And here's my group here, and Lena has been coordinating the study, and Gustav is helping us with the MEG also. So thanks a lot.